On July 1st, getting into law school stops being the hard part. Paying for it becomes the part that breaks people. And almost nobody applying right now knows it's coming. For the last several decades, the deal was simple. Whatever law school cost, the federal government would lend you the whole thing, including tuition, rent, food, books, the entire bill, no matter how big it was. But on July 1st, that deal is done. The government's going to cap what a law student can borrow, and at most law schools, that cap doesn't come close to covering the bill. You're left with a six-figure hole that didn't exist a year ago, and you're going to have to fill it yourself. So if you're starting law school or you're sitting in it right now, this rewrites the math of your life. And the people who get hit hardest aren't the ones who look broke on paper. They're the ones without a parent who can co-sign a loan. Now, I've been teaching the LSAT for the past 20 years. I've never seen a change this big land this fast. Today, we're going to talk about exactly what happens on July 1st, the math that nobody's putting in front of you, who gets crushed, and how to protect yourself. Quick timeline because it matters here. On July 4th, 2025, a bill got signed into law called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. You'll also see it written as HR 1 or Public Law 119-21. It touches a lot of different things, but buried inside it is a section that rewrites how every graduate and professional student in this country pays for law school. Big picture, the federal Grad PLUS loan program is being eliminated for new borrowers starting July 1st, 2026. Grad PLUS is signed law with a hard date on it, and some of the fine print is still being finalized by the Department of Ed, and I'll flag later where that matters, but the date and the big structural changes are already locked in. When you go to law school, the federal government basically offers you two buckets of loan money. Bucket one is the direct, unsubsidized loan, capped at $20,500 a year. It's been stuck there for years, and it was never enough to cover law school by itself. Bucket two is the Grad PLUS loan, and that allowed you to borrow up to the full cost of attendance. In other words, whatever your law school said it cost, the government would lend you the gap between that number and your other aid with no real ceiling. If school cost $90,000 a year and you've got no other source, you borrow $90,000 from the government. Now, Grad PLUS did not care what you earned or what you already owned. Oh, there was no income check, no debt to income math, just a basic credit screen to confirm you were not in active bankruptcy or in default, and that was it. And so a 22-year-old with no income, no savings, no rich parents could walk in and borrow the entire cost of their education from the government. And that is what is about to disappear. And a lot of people who are counting on it are going to hit a wall. Now, Grad PLUS goes away for new borrowers, and in its place you get hard caps with real ceilings for the first time in decades. Grad students have a lifetime cap of $100,000, annual limit of $20,500 a year, but law school sits in a different category called professional student or professional educations, including med school, dental school, pharmacy school. They let you borrow $50,000 a year, up to $200,000 in a lifetime. So if you start law school after July 1st, that is your ceiling, $50,000 a year. Doesn't matter if your school charges more. Doesn't matter if the old system would have covered the whole thing. And $50,000 a year might sound like a lot of money, and it is a lot, but it's not what law school costs. The average law school graduate right now leaves owing about $137,500 in student debt. Around $112,000 of that is the law degree by itself, and the rest is typically undergraduate debt riding along on top. But averages can be misleading, of course. At a private law school, the all-in cost of attendance, including living expenses, averages around $88,000 a year. At the elite schools, tuition alone costs $80,000. With living costs, you're at $85,000, $90,000 a year. 3 years can total past $250,000. Now, you can only borrow up to $150,000 over the course of 3 years from the federal government under the new rules. And so there is a gap there of $114,000. And the question becomes, where can you get that money? It could come from scholarships, which I think are the best source. It could come from cash in the bank if you have savings, which most 23-year-olds don't have. Or you can resort to private loans, which have their problems, including high interest rates. And this problem is not limited to elite schools, of course. There are plenty of mid-tier private schools where you are going to exceed what you could borrow from the government after these changes go into effect. And the lifetime ceiling of $257,500, that's the total federal student loan you are allowed over the course of your entire life, including your undergraduate loans. And so if you borrow for undergrad, you're then eating into what you could borrow for grad school or professional school. Bottom line, you've got to find other sources to pay for your education outside of federal loans. And the private loans have high interest rates. And so it compounds over time, could end up being something that you owe over the course of your entire professional career. And that could be variable over time as well, meaning if interest rates rise, you're paying more over time. And so what I'm going to suggest is that you find other sources of income to pay for this education, this tuition, these bills, outside of private loans, outside of cash if you don't have big savings. I think the best source, of course, is going to be scholarship money. Now, there are two kinds of scholarships. There are merit-based and need-based. Merit-based is based on the strength of your application. Law schools want to incentivize you to choose their school over others because you help them raise their standing in the U.S. News rankings, which increases the prestige of their school, helps them attract more donations from alums, helps them attract more applicants in the future. Need-based aid is based on your financial situation, which, of course, you can't really control in the short term. It is what it is. And so if you can demonstrate financial need, law schools will offer you scholarships out of the goodness of their hearts to help you close that gap. But if you cannot demonstrate poverty or extreme need, then merit-based is going to be the route that you go. And so what you want is strong numbers relative to the law schools that you are applying to. If you can apply with a higher GPA than their median, a higher LSAT score than their median, then you will help them raise their standing, help them improve the average strength of their class. Now, your GPA might be pretty fixed at this point if you're finishing up undergrad or you're already out of undergrad, but your LSAT score, that's the biggest needle mover you have available to you at your disposal. And it could be as simple as retaking the LSAT if you have already taken it before, or putting in some more effort into it. The LSAT's offered 8 times a year, once every month or every other month. You've got coming up the LSAT in August, September, October, November, this calendar year. Then going into next calendar year, you have January, February, April, and June. Now, applying earlier is better than applying later, all else being equal. And so I would encourage you, speaking now in June, that you take the LSAT and apply earlier in the cycle if possible. Aim for August or September. Apply when applications open in September if you can. And if you've already taken the LSAT, didn't hit your goal, retake. One single sitting, 2.5 hours, can help you radically improve your odds of getting into better law schools and help you get more scholarship money to help close that gap in funding your tuition, funding your legal education. It weighs more heavily than your undergraduate GPA, and retaking the LSAT could involve as little as just taking one timed practice test a week, reviewing it in depth. That alone might be enough. If you're not sure how to study, if you want some support with your LSAT prep, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. You can book that free tutoring lesson with me personally at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link to book that free lesson is unpluggedprep.com/start below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. It's a quick reference covering everything in logical reasoning and reading comprehension. You can grab that at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. It's a free download, free PDF available to everyone, open offer, everyone watching this now or later. I see questions here in the chat. Happy to get to as many as I can. Feel free to just drop them in. I see Casey's asking, I need help with tutoring. That's exactly what I do, Casey. Book the free tutoring lesson with me if you haven't already. Links in my bio on TikTok and IG. Open offer to everybody watching this now or later. Let's see other questions here I could help with. Grant is asking, is Purdue Business School close to being a target school? I'm going there next year. Well, I couldn't speak to Purdue specifically, not too familiar with it, and we're doing law school here, not business school. But when we talk about target schools, I mean, you could group law schools that you're targeting, or any school really, into 3 different buckets: safety, reach, and target. Safety being a school where your numbers are above their medians, and so you've got a pretty good shot at getting in. Of course, there are no guarantees in life, but if you were above a law school's LSAT median and their GPA median, you've got a pretty good shot at getting in because you're strong relative to their average applicant. A target school is where your numbers are kind of on point, where you're sitting right at their medians. And so you could say maybe it's a 50-50. And then a reach school is a school where your numbers are below their medians. And so it's a little bit of a long shot, but you take enough long shots, you might get lucky. And so it's worth applying to a couple of safeties just to hedge your bets, a couple of targets and a couple of reaches, and then see what offers come back to you. I would recommend applying to, all else being equal, why not apply to 5 of each? Apply to 15 law schools. Not crazy to do. And of course, some of them have different essays. You could reuse a lot of the same essays for different schools, adjust accordingly as the prompt requires, but it's worth casting a wide net. And then the benefit additionally being that is that you get into more law schools and you have more scholarship negotiation leverage as well. I see Colin's asking about early decision. And so I typically recommend against applying to law school binding early decision, because if you apply binding early decision, you lose all your scholarship negotiation leverage. You're basically committing to go to their law school, regardless of the scholarship money they offer you, in which case, why would they have incentive to offer you scholarships if you already committed to go there without knowing what it's going to cost? Applying early is good, of course. Applying earlier is better than applying later because law school admissions is conducted on a rolling basis, meaning that law schools can evaluate applications in the order in which they receive those applications. And when you apply earlier in the cycle, it's a bit easier to get in. There's also more scholarship money available. If you apply later in the cycle, there are fewer seats. They've already given some away, and they've also given away some of the money in the pot for scholarships as well. And so, speaking now in June, I would say aim to take the LSAT August or September if you can. Apply when applications open in the fall. You'll have a relatively better shot of getting in. Scanning through for other questions here. Aves is asking, what is considered early? So the cycle starts in September, runs through, say, April or so, depending on when a law school has their deadlines for applications. And so early would be September of that cycle or October of that cycle. The cycle has shifted later and later over time, such that, broadly speaking, you could argue that anything in the calendar year where applications open is early. And so even October or November could be considered early. January or February is kind of smack in the middle, and then March, April would be on the later side. I see Ariana's asking, do you think raising my score by 8 points in 2 months is doable? Broadly speaking, yes, but we got to look at what kind of increase are you looking for. I mean, can you go from a 152 to a 160? I'd say that's pretty reasonable. 172 to 180, that's a lot harder to achieve, of course. But if you're in the 150s, 160s or less, I'd say 8 points is pretty doable, of course. I don't know anything about your particular situation, but I would want to know a bit more to give you more targeted advice, not just on chances, but on how to actually go about this. I'd be curious to know how long you've been studying for, what kind of resources you've been using. Have you been using LSAT for Dummies and ChatGPT, or have you taken a prep course? Have you gotten coaching? Have you gotten live personal feedback on what you're getting wrong and why? Because the thing is that when you're studying on your own, you don't know what you don't know. But once we add some support into the mix, there's usually a pretty quick score boost, meaning there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. And so if you want to get some guidance on what your study plan could look like, you want some support, you can book the free tutoring lesson with me if you haven't already. Links below the video, pinned in the chat in my bio as well. Ken's is asking, how rare is it to get a full ride to law school? Not that rare. There's a pretty significant percentage of people who get full rides and get all of their tuition covered. Most people don't pay sticker. Most people get some form of scholarship money. The question is how much. And there is a limited set, but still significant, who get a full ride. The likelihood of you getting a full ride is just based on the strength of your numbers. If you are above a given law school's 75th percentile LSAT and 75th percentile GPA, you've got a pretty good shot at getting significant scholarship money, maybe even a full ride. And to Vaishnavi's question here, if you're above on the LSAT median but below on the GPA median, you're a so-called splitter applicant, which is fine. Law schools love splitters, and they actually weigh your LSAT score more heavily than your undergraduate GPA anyway. And so better to have a high LSAT, low GPA than a high GPA, low LSAT. And if you're GPA is low, then you want to balance it with a higher LSAT. If your LSAT's low, then I would argue just retake the LSAT at a higher score, especially speaking now in June. You can retake it in August or September and apply when apps open in September. Now, in terms of the specific LSAT score you need for given law schools, I don't know all of the medians off the top of my head. What I would encourage you to do is Google a given law school and the number 509, and you will find the American Bar Association 509 report for any given law school. You'll see their LSAT median, you'll see their GPA median, and you'll be able to get a general sense of what kind of numbers you need in order to be competitive. And it's not just what LSAT score do you need, it's also what GPA you need. It's a function of both. And if you're below on the GPA, you want to be above on the LSAT to compensate. Extracurriculars don't really play much of a role. They're considered a soft factor, they're not quantifiable, and so law schools discount those. They don't give them as much weight as they would otherwise. It's not like undergraduate admissions where they want to see leadership, for example, or community service. Law school is not about that. They're about your numbers because of the US News rankings, which only quantify that which can be quantified. Jiggy's asking, I'm 25, trying to go to law school. Am I cooked? Not at all. There are plenty of people in their late 20s, early 30s, 40s, and beyond. Law schools love so-called non-traditional applicants. They love the real-world life and work experience that you bring to the table. And being 25 is probably only a couple of years out of undergrad, and so it's not a problem at all in the slightest. And I see Adam's asking about working during undergrad. If you've worked during undergrad, that's great context to include in your application. It could also explain why your GPA from undergrad might be lower than it otherwise would have been. And so make sure that you have that on your resume. Make sure you have it on your addendum as well if you want to write an addendum explaining that. And whether it's accounting or anything else, maybe write an essay about it, talking about your experience in that role. And accounting, anything numbers related, is unique in the law school world, and so they're going to want to see that and they'll appreciate it. Now, when it comes to your GPA from undergrad, it's about all the credits, all the classes that go into comprising your undergraduate GPA, earning you your bachelor's degree. And so they're looking at, if you went to community college, they're looking at that transcript as well as the transcript from your 4-year institution. They're combining all of that together and they're making their own calculations for that. And so you're going to want to forward all of those transcripts to the Law School Admission Council, and they're going to do their own calculations to determine their version of your GPA, which is what law schools are going to actually consider, and that's what's going to go to US News as well. Just looking through for other questions here. Sue's asking, 3.6 GPA, 170 LSAT, goal is Ivy. What should I focus on when applying? Okay, so for law school, we consider the top law schools or the elite schools the T14, not Ivy specifically. Ivy's more of an undergrad thing, but there are, of course, many Ivy League schools in the T14 as well. For those wondering, the T14 are the top 14 law schools that are consistently ranked pretty highly in those US News law school rankings. They would include Stanford, Yale, Harvard, Columbia, Cornell, NYU, and so on. Then there's some that are on the lower side as well, like Georgetown, UCLA, some that fall in and out of the categorization, but those are the rankings. The T14 LSAT medians typically range 170 to 174, 175. The GPA medians range from 392 to 399. And so for Sue, who's commenting here with a 3.6 GPA, we're 0.32 off of the T14 GPA medians. So in other words, Sue is 0.32 below on the GPA, which is pretty significant. And then Sue's at a 170, which is the bottom end of the LSAT median range. And so, Sue, your numbers, frankly speaking, are not bad in general, but when it comes to the T14, they're on the low side. You would have a uphill battle getting in part particularly because of the GPA weighing you down a little bit. And so my suggestion would be retake the LSAT. If you're below on the GPA median, you want to be above on the LSAT median, and you're on the lower end of the LSAT side as well. If you could get a 176, 177 LSAT, you're going to have a much better chance of getting in because of your GPA. And I recommend focusing on the LSAT here because Your GPA, it sounds like from what you shared, might be a done deal already. If you've already finished undergrad, you're not going to change that GPA from undergrad, but you can improve your LSAT by retaking it. And so I would want to get you 6-7 points more on the LSAT side. That's where I would focus. And if you want help talking through what an LSAT retake plan could look like, you can, of course, book the free tutoring lesson with me and we could talk through it as well. Jack is asking, for the sake of looking at GPA, do they factor in the difficulty of your undergrad coursework? For context, yes, of course, a GPA in engineering versus a GPA in English mean two very different things. Obviously, it's harder to get a 4.0 in engineering than a 4.0 in English. At the same time, though, unfortunately, the numbers are the numbers. The American Bar Association does not distinguish between GPAs earned in different majors. Neither does the US News rankings. And of course, you could argue that they should, but they don't. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's optimal, but that's the system, and they're not going to change things anytime soon, as far as I've heard. And so, what that means is that if you were choosing a major and law school admissions was your sole focus, then I would say you wanted to choose classes where you could get easier grades. What some folks will do is they'll take some community college classes at a local school over the summer to help get some easy A's and boost up the GPA a little bit. But if you've already chosen your major, you've already taken your classes, it might be a done deal as far as the GPA side is concerned, but you can, of course, improve your LSAT score by retaking it to compensate. I see AJ's asking, for testing in September and August, is it possible to make a 165? Maybe. I would need to know more. I mean, where are you scoring right now? August versus September is two different things. August is 2 months away. September is 3 months away. Where are you currently scoring? How long have you been studying for? Have you taken any courses? Have you gotten any coaching? How many hours can you put in per day and per week? There's a lot of unknowns here, so I can't give you a specific answer. But let's say if you could study for the LSAT full-time and you're taking a course or you're going to get some coaching, then you're relatively more likely to hit a particular score. If you're working full-time or you're taking summer classes full-time and you're not taking a course and you're just self-studying, it's going to be harder. And so ultimately, your improvement is going to be a function of the amount that you study and the way in which you study. And when you're on a shorter time frame, you're going to want to take a more intensive boot camp style approach. For students reaching out to me right now who are aiming for the August or September LSATs and just getting started now, I want them studying 5-6 days a week at minimum, putting in at least 2-3 hours a day if they want to achieve a top score, if they want to hit a 170 plus. If you can't put in that much time, then you might want to push back to a later test date, or you might want to get some more intensive support to help you study more efficiently. Maybe get some personal coaching a couple times a week. Now, for those asking about pricing, I see questions in the chat about that. We personalize every program to the individual student, considering your starting point, your goal score, your time frame, how many hours you can put in per day and per week. It's not a one-size-fits-all because everyone's got different particulars in terms of what they're looking to achieve and what they can put in. And so if you want to talk through what your personal study plan could look like, what your personal coaching plan could look like, you can book a free tutoring lesson with me. The link to book that free lesson is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video, pinned in the chat in my bio as well. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. It's a quick reference on everything logical reasoning and reading comp. You can grab that as a free download through my bio and below the video as well. JSL is asking, is it true that schools are not prone to splitters, like people who have a 365 GPA and a 172 LSAT? Awfully specific question there. But yes, so law schools do like splitters, actually. They do actually weigh your LSAT score more heavily than your undergraduate GPA, in part because of grade inflation and due to the fact that GPAs from undergrad are wildly unreliable because based on what you majored in, based on the ease with which your professor gives out easy A's, they don't really know what to make of your GPA, but a 365 is a below average GPA for a lot of schools because there are so many folks getting easy A's and easy majors. And so the 172 on the LSAT is a more reliable indication of someone's academic abilities, aside from certain majors being easier than others, certain professors giving out easier A's than others. You've also got to consider that people earned their GPAs at different times. There are some folks who are applying to law school at the age of 20 or 21 who just got their GPA, or who are still in school right now. Then there are others who've been out of school for 10, 15, 20 years, back when grade inflation was not as big as it is now. And also, who they were 10, 15, 20 years ago is not who they are today. They've grown, they've matured, they've changed. If you're 62, then who you were back then is not who you are now if you earned your GPA 40 years ago. And so the LSAT being earned within the past couple of years is a more recent and therefore more indicative metric of what you're capable of doing. Now I see BM Skill is asking, what LSAT would you aim for with a 3.8 GPA? I would aim for a 180 because I would always aim for a 180. Why aim for anything less? In terms of what score do you need, that depends on the law schools that you're targeting. Every law school has a different requirement given their medians. And so a 3.8 GPA is a pretty strong GPA, unless you're applying to a top law school, in which case their GPA medians could be in the 3.9 range, in which case you'd be below their medians. And so you'd want to have a higher LSAT score to compensate, like I was saying to Sue earlier, who might need to have a 176, 177 to compensate for a lower GPA. So it's all relative to the law schools that you're targeting. Numbers are not necessarily good or bad in the abstract. It's all related to what particulars you're targeting. But you can't look at numbers in a vacuum. And so for AZ, who's asking 3.5 GPA in econ from UCLA, is that low? I mean, if you're comparing to other econ majors, maybe not. If you're looking at it for law school admissions, when you're competing with those who got easy A's in sociology or English, for example, then it might be low. And so the question becomes, what law schools are you targeting? How does your 3.5 GPA relate to the medians of the law schools that you're looking to attend? So always look up the specifics for your given law schools, and that'll give you a more concrete answer in terms of what you need. But I can say that broadly speaking, for a tier 1 law school, a 3.5 GPA is going to be below the medians, unfortunately. That's just the case. And so you want to have that higher LSAT to compensate. Matthew's asking, is 6 months of prep adequate? Very well could be. A lot of folks will try to knock out the LSAT in 2 to 3 months, but it typically takes 5 to 6 months to reach your fullest potential. And so if you're just starting now, you want to get a top score, I think that January, for example, is a pretty good time frame to really make anything happen between now and then. I see Adam's asking about, when should an undergraduate take the LSAT if they want to begin law school after graduation? And I see Ingen's asking about when to start studying for the LSAT in college. If you are currently in high school or you are a freshman in college, I think it might be premature to start studying for the LSAT. I don't think that you need to start now. I would focus, if you're a high school student, focus on getting into college. Maybe focus on the SAT to start with. If you're a freshman in college, do some exploration. Figure out what you want to major in. Think about what you want to do with your career. The LSAT's not going anywhere. And you can start studying for the LSAT as a sophomore, take it as a junior, and you'll still have plenty of time. Your LSAT score is good for 5 years, but some folks end up wanting to take a gap year or two between undergrad and law school. I think there's something to be said for taking the LSAT while you're still in an academic mindset. It's easier to take the LSAT while you're an undergrad versus been out for several years and hard to get back into hitting the books. But I would say if you're a freshman or high school student, you don't need to start yet. JSL, who's applying to law school at the age of 62, which is awesome, is asking, does my age and experience give me some advantage, especially if I've achieved executive level over 30 years? Absolutely. Law schools love so-called older, non-traditional students with more life experience. It will not be a downside for you. If anything, it could be an advantage. I've made some videos on the YouTube channel about this over time, so check those out for more. But yes, they will appreciate the work experience. They will discount your undergraduate GPA if you earned it a while back, and they'll place more emphasis on your LSAT score and your work experience. So certainly make sure that you highlight your work experience in your application essays and your resume as well. User 2827 is asking, I applied to law school in December, but they haven't responded, and classes start in August. Am I cooked? No, you are not. Law schools are taking longer and longer to get back to applicants. They're waitlisting more and more folks. They're just not responding for a long time because, for those who aren't aware, the number of applicants has increased significantly over the past 2 years. It's year-over-year increases for 2 years in a row. This is the largest number of applicants in approximately 20 years or so. And so law schools are inundated with applications, and they're waiting to see who else will come along so they can keep boosting up the medians of their classes. It's not nice of them to make people wait for so long, but you might get off the wait list. You might hear back from them in July or even early August and move across the country last minute to attend the law school of your dreams. It happens every year. Not saying it's going to happen, of course, but you might be in limbo for quite some time. And ultimately, it is no fun to wait now, but hopefully you'll end up getting some good news in the short term. And if you have been waitlisted, if you haven't heard back for a long time, then yes, you should send a letter of continued interest, a short letter just following up, reiterating your interest in the school, saying, hey, so-and-so law school, you're still my number one choice. I still love to attend. If I am accepted, I will say yes. Update them on on anything that you can since you last applied. For example, if you got a promotion at work, if you got an award, if you retook the LSAT and got a higher score, those are all good things to include. C. Matthew's asking, does a master's degree help with admissions? Not really. Law schools do not consider your graduate level degrees when determining your GPA. For law school admissions purposes, only your undergraduate GPA is considered. It functions like a soft. It's nice to have. It's also quite costly in terms of tuition, so I wouldn't get a master's degree to think that it's going to help with admissions. It won't help to that extent. It might be a little nice to have, but doesn't really have any significant impact. So the master's degree, I'm not sure it's really going to help you in any way. Work experience can help. They like to see work experience. Depending on the master's, of course, maybe it could help, but I wouldn't over-index on it. I would rather you spend that time getting a higher LSAT score if you can. By the way, folks, for those of you just joining, I do these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you're watching this. If you find these helpful, please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives. The algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. So I do appreciate your support, spreading the word, sharing this to your socials, LinkedIn, sharing this on Discords, subreddits, Facebook groups, pre-law societies. The more this grows, the more I will expand it over time. Sandy McCrone's asking, do you think it's hard getting into a top 20 law school without any law-related soft? No, you don't need to have a law-related soft. I think that most folks probably don't. I mean, especially if you were going straight from undergrad into law school, you might not have ever had the opportunity to get a law-related soft. Now, if you have worked as a paralegal, will that help? Yes. If you had an internship at a law firm, will that help? Yes, it will. But you don't need to have it. If you have it, talk about it. If you don't have it, don't go out looking for it just because you think it'll help. That time's better spent studying for the LSAT and getting a few more points. Pickham's asking, what are the best majors for undergraduate when planning to go to law school? You can major in literally anything and go to law school, doesn't matter what. Common majors, of course, would be political science, criminal justice, any general pre-law major. But those who do the best on the LSAT, strangely, typically don't major in those subjects. The highest LSAT scoring majors would include comp sci, philosophy, engineering. They all do better on the LSAT than average. And I don't know if it's because those majors teach you something about the LSAT or because the people who tend to choose those majors are already predisposed to do well on the LSAT. Anything that involves reading difficult, dense text, which of course philosophy does, might help. But also consider that you want to choose a major where you can get a good GPA. So keep that in mind. I mean, the best LSAT prep is just studying for the LSAT. You don't need to study anything external. T is asking, to move 10, 15 points on the LSAT in 3 months or 6 months, how many hours studying daily would you recommend? So I always think about this like Olympic athletes asking, how much should I train to win the gold medal? I'm not sure it's the right question. I mean, you want to max it out. Like if you want to score at the top, and do better than 99% of people, you've got to study differently and better and more than 99% of people. Of course, you also want to study efficiently, but I don't think you ask, how much could I do? How much should I do? How little could I get away with? Not saying you're asking it, but people ask that sometimes. I would aim to do as much as you can without burning out. And so if you were in the fortunate position to be able to study for the LSAT with no other obligations, I'd want you putting in 5-6 hours a day. Not saying you have to, but if you could do 3 hours in the morning, have lunch, 3 hours in the afternoon, call it a day, I think that would be fantastic. If you are not in that position and you're working or you're in school, you have family obligations, even just doing 2 hours, maybe 3 on weekdays, a little bit more on weekends, that could be enough. It's all about how you go about it. And so are you just reading textbooks? Are you watching videos? Or are you getting other support, like taking classes, getting coaching, ideally one-on-one, getting some personal feedback on what you're getting wrong and why you're getting it wrong? Are you reviewing your mistakes in depth? Not just looking at the answer key and saying, oh, I get it now. How could I have been so dumb? A lot of folks do that. You really want to dig into your mistakes, because ultimately the LSAT does repeat itself. And if you can spot the tricks and traps, you can learn to avoid them. It all comes down to understanding how the test makers think and seeing it from their perspective. And so if you can adopt that mindset in your studying, in your review, you're going to see bigger gains. And if you want some help embarking on this journey, making sure that you're going about it the right way, you can book the free LSAT tutoring with me. For those just joining, I'm offering a free LSAT tutoring lesson for everybody watching this now and later. You can book the free tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat in my bio as well. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet, a quick reference on everything logical reasoning and reading comp. You can grab that as well through the link below, in the link in my bio as well. Late Night Sniper's asking, can I get a full ride to law school at night? Does being African American help with law school scholarships? So you can get a full ride, whether for full-time law school or part-time law school in the evenings. Your ability to get a full ride is based on the strength of your numbers. And so if you can apply with a GPA above their medians and an LSAT above their medians, you put yourself in the running to get some significant scholarship money, maybe even a full ride. When it comes to race and affirmative action, that becomes a bit trickier because, of course, the Supreme Court has banned race-based affirmative action, and law schools are certainly concerned about complying with the ruling, and the federal government is looking to crack down on schools that perceives as violating that. Of course, it's one thing to admit on the basis of race, it's another to give scholarships on that basis as well, but I think that law schools are looking to tread very carefully in general around all of this, so I don't know that you're going to get a boost on the basis of race alone. Aves is asking, how much more are splitters valued in admissions than reverse splitters? So if you look at the law school admissions index published by virtually every single law school, you can see those formulas on the American Bar Association website, or the LSAC website as well, I think. Virtually every law school weighs your LSAT more heavily than your undergraduate GPA, meaning they weigh they would like splitters more than reverse splitters. There are only a couple of law schools that weigh GPA more heavily than LSAT, but almost all of them weigh LSAT more heavily than GPA. Mari's asking, do you recommend working at any time during 1L if at a full-time T14? If not 1L, what about 2L or 3L? So law schools, as a general rule, do not allow you to work during law school if you're attending full-time, because law school is such a big obligation that if you try to work during that time, it's going to tank your grades and put you at risk of flunking out, essentially. Keep in mind that law school is graded on a curve, and you are competing with folks who generally are not working during this time. And so if you are, you're putting yourself at a pretty serious disadvantage. So I would recommend complying with the rules and certainly not working during 1L. They might get more flexible on that during 2L and 3L with part-time work potentially, but during fall semester 1L, I would not have anything else going on, just because it is such a big time constraint. Justice is asking, my logical reasoning has been steadily improving, but my reading comp is slower. How do I tackle reading comp, studying, and drilling? So a lot of folks get bogged down navigating reading comp passages because they are trying to absorb all the information as if it's content. When you're not reading for content, you're not reading for details, you're reading for structure. How does the author go about making their argument? What is the main point of the passage? And can you place the information in the passage into different buckets like viewpoints, evidence, and then who is advocating a particular position? So hunt for the main point, try to get that down. What's the author's opinion? If they could leave you with only one central idea, what would that central idea be? Use that, articulate it in your own words, then try to knock out the general global questions like main idea, primary purpose, passage organization, best title, tone, author's opinion. Knock those out first, then do the detailed questions that would refer you or bring you back to specific lines or phrases, and then finally save the more inferential questions for last. And so you approach the questions in a particular strategic order that makes sense for you, not just taking things as they're given to you. The other thing I'll say is that a lot of folks approach reading comp inefficiently because they're trying to take too many notes, trying to highlight, trying to underline. Keep it minimal. Just a couple words, jot it down in your scratch paper. What is the main idea? I'll leave it at that. Takes time to write things down, takes time to read things. The highlighting and underlining tools are pretty glitchy and imprecise. They don't work that well, to be frank, so I would just stick with your scratch paper, keeping it really simple. And for anyone who wants some guidance on reading comp or logical reasoning or wants to talk through any of this more, book the tutoring with me, the free lesson, grab the cheat sheet if you haven't already. It's a pretty handy reference on everything I'm talking about here and a whole lot more. Aves is asking, what is your most recommended method of studying? I get caught up in textbooks and it doesn't help. Yeah, I mean, those textbooks can be pretty overwhelming. I recommend staying away from those 500-page LSAT prep phone book materials. It just doesn't take that long to explain anything. And so that free cheat sheet download I mentioned is actually like my antidote to that. Like, I tried to boil everything down as simply as possible rather than giving you 500 pages to wade through. In terms of recommended study methods, I use the LASER approach with my students. LASER is an acronym standing for Learning, Accuracy, Sections, Exams, and Review. It's the framework that we use to design study plans for our students. LASER, starting with learning, is building a strong foundation, learning the different sections and the different question types. You could learn this through a textbook. I think it's better to learn through videos where we boil things down and make them more concise. My YouTube videos are an example of this, but I go deeper inside my on-demand courses. The second phase, A for accuracy, is drilling questions by type to better understand the proper perspective from which to view each section and each question type. S is for individual sections, working on pacing and time management. Basically, how do you allocate time over the course of the section? E is for exams and endurance, doing full-length timed practice tests. And then R is for review, using the Socratic review method, getting down into what is the core of the mistakes that you're making, what are the patterns and what you're getting wrong and why you're getting them wrong. Can you get down to the root cause of your mistakes so that you can avoid making the same mistake again? Because ultimately the LSAT repeats itself over and over and over. They are pretty lazy. They keep using the same bag of tricks again and again. And so you're not falling for every single trick, or else you'd be getting a 120 and getting everything wrong. And so hopefully you're getting some questions right, which means that you are navigating things and dodging some of the tricks. The question is, which ones are you not dodging? And so if you can understand what you're falling for, which tricks and traps you're prone to falling for, if you can understand those mistakes and course correct on them and fill in those fundamentals gaps, you will then avoid making those same mistakes again. That's what we want to help you do. And so we help you document your studying. We help you find the patterns in your mistakes. We give you targeted drills and lessons on the areas that you're most struggling with. We nip those in the bud, and then you see a pretty big increase. That's the idea. We just start with the lowest hanging fruit, move on to the next thing and the next thing after that. And of course, you also want to consider that there are several different types of questions on the LSAT. In logical reasoning, for example, you've got strengthen, weaken, flaw, necessary assumption, sufficient assumption, and so on. 15 different types of logical reasoning questions. The thing, though, is that some question types are more common than others. In logical reasoning, the most common types of questions are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. And so, if you're having issues, we start with those. Better to focus on more common question types if you're having trouble there than to spend time on the hardest questions that hardly ever show up. I mean, like, everybody hates parallel reasoning questions, but there just aren't that many of them. And so we don't start there. We start with the low-hanging fruit that's going to be as impactful as possible, especially if your LSAT's coming up in the next couple months. If you're taking it in 6 months to a year, of course, we're going to cover everything, no matter how infrequent it might be. But when you're on a shorter time frame, we've got to do triage focused on the highest yield areas that give you the most return on your time invested. And so for study plans, we're going to start with the most common question types. Make sure that you are crystal clear, for example, on the difference between necessary assumption and sufficient assumption questions. And if you can't get there by August, you can take it in September. I see Pontiac's asking about retaking in September if you need to. The September LSAT is not too late. Neither is October or November, for example. But I would think that for now, if you've already been studying for a little while, I would aim for August with September as a backup. Could be good to sign for September just for peace of mind, knowing that it's not all riding on August, because if it doesn't go your way, you could still take it in September and still be okay for this cycle. While the LSAT as a whole is incredibly important, no one particular test date will make or break you because you can always retake the LSAT. Law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores. They only take into consideration the highest score on your record because that's all they have incentive to do. The highest score is what they report to the American Bar Association, which in turn is where US News pulls their data from for inclusion in the law school rankings. And so law schools don't have incentive to average scores, just like they don't have incentive to really care about when you applied. October is not too late. November is not too late either. And so whenever you're taking the LSAT, whether it's August, September, October, November, even January or February, if you want to talk through what your study plan could look like, you can book that free tutoring lesson with me personally. The link to book it is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. I've also put together that free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. If you haven't grabbed that yet, you can at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. Also in my bio, also below the video. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. I'll see you all then. In the meantime, all the best. Take care.